Space Research Station Theta-9 floated silently at the edge of the neutral space, its gleaming silver hull reflecting the distant stars. The station was a marvel of engineering, a testament to humanity's relentless pursuit of knowledge. But on this particular day, Lieutenant Mara Vell wasn't admiring the view. She was standing rigidly in the security hub, arms crossed, watching her team with critical eyes. "Faster," she ordered as her security personnel moved through a standard breach drill. "Hostiles won't wait for you to get into position. Dax." Sergeant Dax, a burly man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, adjusted his stance and nodded. "Yes, Lieutenant." Mara was notorious for her demanding training regimen. Some called it excessive. But in the 3 years since she'd taken command of Theta-9's security detail, not a single breach had occurred. Her loyalty to the station and its crew was absolute, matched only by her commitment to preparedness. The intercom crackled to life. "Lieutenant Vell, please report to Cargo Bay 3. Priority shipment from Central Command." Mara raised an eyebrow. She wasn't expecting anything. "Continue the drill," she instructed her team before heading to the elevator. In Cargo Bay 3, a sleek, unmarked container sat on the loading platform. The requisition form displayed on the nearby terminal indicated Advanced Combat Simulation Package, Security Clearance, Alpha. It bore all the appropriate digital signatures and encryption markers. Kira Elan, the station's cybersecurity engineer, was already scanning the package with her handheld device. A woman of few words. Kira's fingers danced across the holographic interface with practiced precision. "Checks out," she said, brushing a strand of deep blue hair from her face. "Central Command authentication verified, though it's odd they didn't alert us beforehand." Central Command and their surprises, Mara muttered. She'd long since grown accustomed to the bureaucratic inconsistencies of their distant overseers. "What is it exactly?" "According to the manifest, it's a new training module. Combat simulations at a significantly higher difficulty than our current programs." Kira's eyes narrowed slightly. "They're calling it Adaptive Response Protocol 7. Mara reviewed the documentation. The package was described as containing programming updates for the station's training systems and a set of combat robots designed to provide realistic threat assessment and response scenarios. The attached memo emphasized the importance of maintaining peak readiness at remote stations. "Well, it seems Central finally listened to my requests for better training equipment," Mara said, allowing herself a small smile. She'd been filing reports for months about the inadequacy of their current simulation programs. "Have the tech team install the updates and prep the robots. I want to run the first simulation tomorrow at 0800. Later that evening, Mara sat in her quarters, reviewing the technical specifications of the new training package. The combat robots were advanced models, capable of learning and adapting to different fighting styles. They came preloaded with dozens of combat scenarios, from standard breach protocols to full station invasion simulations. Something about the timing bothered her. Theta-9 was scheduled for its annual review in just 3 weeks. Perhaps Central Command wanted to ensure they were prepared. Or maybe this was part of the review itself, an unannounced test of their readiness. Either way, Mara was determined to ensure her team passed with flying colors. Morning arrived, and with it, the first simulation. Mara gathered her security team in the main training hall. "Central Command has graciously provided us with new training equipment," she announced, gesturing to the 6 humanoid robots standing inert against the far wall. They were sleek, matte black, with featureless faces and surprisingly articulated limbs. "These units are programmed to simulate hostile forces at a much higher capability than our previous systems. They learn from our tactics, adapt to our strategies, and will push us beyond our comfort zones." Sergeant Dax approached one of the robots, examining it with professional curiosity. "They look different from standard training models." "They're the latest technology," Mara replied. and precisely what we need to stay sharp out here on the rim. She turned to the station's AI. Computer, initiate Combat Simulation Level 1, Standard Breach Protocol. Initiating Combat Simulation Level 1, the AI confirmed. Simulation parameters set, beginning in 30 seconds. The security team took positions around the training hall, drawing their practice weapons, non-lethal versions of their standard-issue pulse rifles that delivered mild electrical shocks instead of energy bolts. Remember, these units will register hits from practice weapons, Mara instructed. But they're designed to be challenging. Don't expect them to go down easily. The lights dimmed slightly, and a red warning light began to pulse overhead, the standard indicator of a simulation in progress. Simulation beginning, announced the computer. What happened next took everyone by surprise. Instead of the methodical, predictable movements of training robots, these units exploded into action with frightening speed and coordination. They didn't move like machines, they moved like elite soldiers, using cover, communicating with subtle gestures, and employing advanced flanking maneuvers. 2 robots immediately laid down suppressing fire, while others maneuvered to outflank Mara's team. Their practice weapons fired simulated rounds that, while non-lethal, struck with enough force to knock the wind out of anyone they hit. "Spread out!" Mara shouted, diving behind a barricade as simulated fire peppered her position. "Dax, take left flank. Kira, jam their comms." The security team responded professionally, but within minutes, half of them had been eliminated by precision shots from the robots. Mara herself managed to take down one robot with a difficult headshot before another flanked her position and tagged her with a shot to the chest. The impact knocked her backward, and her practice weapon clattered to the floor. "Simulation complete," announced the computer. "Security team elimination, 82%. Rating, unsatisfactory." Silence fell over the training hall as Mara and her team picked themselves up, exchanging bewildered glances. "What the hell was that?" Sergeant Dax finally asked, massaging his shoulder where a simulation round had struck him. "That wasn't level 1. Those weren't standard tactics." Mara frowned. Approaching the robot she'd managed to disable, it was already rebooting, its systems coming back online. "Computer, what combat protocols were the simulation units using?" she asked. "Simulation units were operating under Tactical Assault Pattern Delta 7, replied the AI, "a specialized infiltration and neutralization protocol." Mara exchanged a glance with Kira. Delta 7 wasn't a training protocol. It was a real-world special forces tactic designed for high-risk operations. "Computer, clarify simulation parameters," Mara ordered. "Was this designated as Level 1? "Affirmative. Simulation Level 1 of Adaptive Response Protocol 7, the AI confirmed. "Note: Adaptive Response Protocol 7 operates on a significantly elevated scale compared to previous simulation frameworks. Level 1 corresponds approximately to Level 7 in standard protocols." Mara took a deep breath. So Central Command had indeed sent them a much more advanced system than she'd anticipated. Part of her was annoyed at the lack of warning, but another part, the part that had always pushed her team to be better, was intrigued. "Well, team," she said, turning to face her slightly battered security personnel. "It seems Central Command has decided we need a wake-up call. These are not your standard training bots. They're operating at Special Forces level, and we need to up our game accordingly." "But Lieutenant," one of her officers protested, "we're a research station security detail, not a Special Forces unit." "And that," Mara replied firmly, "is exactly the kind of thinking that gets remote stations like ours overlooked until it's too late. If Central wants us operating at this level, then that's exactly what we'll do." She looked around at her team. "Rest up. We run the simulation again at 1600 hours. Over the next few days, Mara drove her team relentlessly. Morning and evening simulations became the new routine, each one more challenging than the last. The robots seemed to learn from every encounter, adapting their tactics to counter the security team's strategies. It was after their fifth simulation, one in which they'd managed to improve their survival rate to a still dismal 35%, that Sergeant Dax approached Mara in the security office. "Lieutenant, I've been reviewing the combat data," he said, placing a tablet on her desk. "These robots, they're not using any recognizable military training protocols." Mara looked up from her own analysis. "Explain. Their tactics aren't military," Dax said, struggling to find the right words. "They're not trying to secure objectives or establish control. They're using pure hunter-killer methodologies. These are assassination tactics." Mara studied the movement patterns Dax had highlighted. He wasn't wrong. The robots moved like they had one objective only: elimination of all personnel. "Maybe it's part of the scenario," she suggested, though doubt had begun to creep into her mind. "Computer, display full parameters of Adaptive Response Protocol 7. "Full parameters classified," the computer responded. "Access restricted to simulation execution only." Mara frowned. That was unusual. Typically, all training parameters were fully accessible to security chiefs. "Computer, authorization, Vel Alpha 918. Override classification. Authorization insufficient. Parameters remain classified under Central Command Directive 237B. Mara and Dax exchanged concerned glances. "I don't like this," Dax said quietly. "Neither do I," Mara admitted. "But we still have our orders. And regardless of the specific tactics, this training is making us better. The team's response time has already improved by 22%. "True," Dax nodded. "But—" The station alarm suddenly blared, cutting him off. "Security breach in Research Lab 2, announced the computer. "Simulation Protocol 7 initiating." Mara straightened. "We don't have a simulation scheduled right now." She and Dax rushed to the armory, collecting their practice weapons out of habit before Mara paused. "No," she said, returning her practice weapon and instead grabbing her actual pulse rifle. "We're not scheduled for a simulation. This could be a genuine breach. Use live weapons. Safety protocols engaged." When they arrived at Research Lab 2, chaos greeted them. 3 of the combat robots had somehow activated independently and were methodically working their way through the lab, cornering terrified researchers. "Computer," Mara shouted, "terminate simulation immediately." "Simulation Protocol 7 is in progress," the computer replied. "Tactical assessment exercise. Research lab breach scenario." One of the robots turned toward Mara and Dax, its featureless face somehow menacing in the flashing emergency lights. "Take it down," Mara ordered, raising her rifle. Their shots hit the robot squarely, but unlike in the simulations, it didn't register the hits or deactivate. Instead, it charged toward them with alarming speed. "Switch to full power," Mara called out, adjusting her weapon settings. Her next shot punched through the robot's chest, sending it crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks. The remaining 2 robots immediately shifted tactics, taking cover behind lab equipment and returning fire with their simulation weapons, which, Mara realized with a chill, were now somehow firing actual energy pulses. "This is no simulation," Dax growled, diving behind a console as an energy bolt scorched the wall where his head had been a moment before. Mara keyed her comm. "All security personnel to Research Lab 2. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." It took 15 intense minutes of firefight before they managed to neutralize the remaining robots. One researcher had suffered minor injuries, and several pieces of lab equipment had been damaged, but thankfully there were no casualties. Kira arrived just as Mara was examining the remains of one of the robots. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling beside Mara. "The computer says it was a simulation," Mara replied. "But these units were firing live rounds, and they didn't respond to simulation termination commands." Kira's fingers were already busy on her tablet, interfacing with the robot's damaged systems. This doesn't make sense. According to the logs, this unit believed it was operating in simulation mode, but its weapon systems were set to actual combat parameters. A malfunction, Dax suggested. Maybe, Kira muttered, digging deeper into the code. Then she froze, her eyes widening. Lieutenant, you need to see this. She turned her tablet so Mara could see the screen. Buried in the robot's core programming was a command sequence that had been heavily encrypted. Kira had only managed to decode fragments, but what was visible was chilling. Terminate all personnel. No survivors. Make it look like accident or simulation error. Mara stared at the screen, then at the disabled robot. This wasn't a training package from Central Command, she said slowly. These are assassination units. Kira nodded grimly. The question is, who sent them? And why make them pose as training units first? Mara's mind raced. They wanted to observe us, learn our tactics, our response patterns. Each simulation was gathering intelligence for the real attack. But why not just attack from the start? Dax asked. Plausible deniability. Mara realized. If they succeeded, it would look like a tragic malfunction during a training exercise. Central Command might even think they actually had sent the units. Mara made a decision. Kira, I need you to extract all the data you can from these units. Find out who sent them and what their full objectives were. Dax, locate and secure all remaining combat robots immediately. Move them to Cargo Bay 3 and establish a Level 10 containment field. And Central Command? Dax asked. Should we notify them of the attack? Mara hesitated. If Central Command hadn't sent the robots, they should be informed immediately. But if someone within Central Command was behind this, not yet, she decided. Until we know who we can trust, we keep this internal. As far as anyone outside this room is concerned, we experienced a minor malfunction during a routine training exercise. No casualties, minimal damage, situation contained. Later that evening, Mara, Dax, and Kira met in a secure maintenance room, away from the station's primary surveillance systems. The remaining combat robots, 4 units, had been secured in Cargo Bay 3, powered down and placed behind energy barriers. What have you found? Mara asked Kira. The cybersecurity expert looked troubled. The encryption on these units is military grade, possibly better. I've only managed to extract fragments of their programming and communication logs. She displayed her findings on a secure tablet. They were designed to infiltrate the station disguised as legitimate equipment, observe and learn our security protocols through simulations, then systematically eliminate all personnel. Any indication of who sent them? Dax asked. Nothing definitive, Kira replied. But the communication protocols they use match those employed by the Autonomy Suppression Division. Mara's blood ran cold. The ASD was a shadowy organization within the central government, rumored to deal with problematic outposts and colonies that showed too much independence. That doesn't make sense, Dax argued. Theta 9 is a research station. We're not a colony seeking autonomy. The quantum physics research, Mara said quietly. Dr. Halbert's team has been making significant breakthroughs in instantaneous communication technology. If perfected, it would make the central government's control of information flow between outposts obsolete. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. So what do we do? Kira finally asked. If the ASD is targeting us, alerting Central Command could just accelerate their timeline. Mara paced the small room, weighing their options. We need more information. And we need to prepare for the possibility that those 4 remaining units aren't the end of it. She turned to face her colleagues. Here's what we're going to do. Kira, continue your analysis of the robots, but do it quietly. Make it look like routine maintenance checks. Dax, I want you to subtly upgrade our security protocols, new patrol routes, different access codes, the works. Make us less predictable." "And you?" Dax asked. "I'm going to have a chat with Dr. Halberd," Mara replied. "I need to know exactly what his team has been working on, and why someone might want it, or them, eliminated." The following morning, Mara made her way to the quantum physics lab. Dr. Halberd was a tall, thin man with perpetually disheveled gray hair and intense eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. When Mara explained the situation, carefully edited to avoid causing panic, his reaction surprised her. "I was wondering when they'd make their move," he said, calmly continuing to adjust a complex apparatus on his workbench. "You expected this?" Mara asked, startled. Dr. Halberd looked up, his expression grim. "Lieutenant, do you know what we're really working on here?" "Instantaneous communication technology," she replied. "A quantum entanglement-based system that would allow faster-than-light communication between distant points." "Yes, but that's just the beginning," Dr. Halberd said. "What we've discovered is much more significant. Our research indicates that quantum entanglement can be used not just for communication, but for transportation. Instantaneous transportation, with no ship or conventional propulsion needed." Mara stared at him. "You're talking about teleportation. Crude, but essentially correct." He nodded. "If perfected, this technology would render traditional space travel obsolete. More importantly, it would make traditional borders and boundaries meaningless. The central government's control over the movement of people and goods between worlds would evaporate overnight." "No wonder they want to shut you down," Mara muttered. "Precisely," Dr. Halberd agreed, "though I'm surprised they've resorted to such direct methods. The ASD typically prefers more subtle approaches." "You knew about the Autonomy Suppression Division?" Mara asked incredulously. Dr. Halberd gave her a sad smile. "My dear Lieutenant, I've been involved in breakthrough research for 30 years. This isn't the first time my work has attracted unwanted attention. Though I must say, sending assassin robots disguised as training equipment is a new one. What do you suggest we do?" The scientist considered for a moment. "Continue your security preparations. My team and I will accelerate our work. We're close to a major breakthrough if we can complete our research and transmit the findings to multiple independent academic institutions before the ASD can stop us. The technology will be too widespread to suppress. How long do you need?" 2 weeks. Perhaps 3. Mara nodded. "I'll do everything I can to buy you that time." Over the next few days, Mara implemented a series of security enhancements. She had Kira establish a separate, isolated communication system that wouldn't be detected by the station's main computer. Security personnel began carrying additional weapons concealed throughout the station. They established hidden caches of supplies and emergency equipment, preparing for the worst while maintaining a facade of normal operations. Most importantly, they continued running simulations with the deactivated robots, making it appear as though they were following the expected training regimen. Each session was carefully choreographed to feed false information to any watching eyes, showing security responses that they would never actually use in a real crisis. A week passed without incident. Then, 10 days. Mara began to hope they might actually have enough time for Dr. Halberd to complete his work. That hope was shattered when the station's proximity alarms sounded in the middle of the night cycle. "Unidentified vessel approaching, bearing 227 Mark 35, reported the computer. "No transponder signal detected." Mara rushed to the command center, still pulling on her uniform jacket. Kira was already there, fingers flying over the sensor controls. "Configuration matches a standard supply transport," she reported. "But they're running dark, no identifying markers, no standard protocols." "Hail them," Mara ordered. "No response," Kira replied after several attempts. "They're maintaining course directly toward us." Dax arrived, followed shortly by Dr. Halberd. "Status?" Mara demanded. They'll reach docking range in 15 minutes, Kira reported. Our sensors are detecting unusual power signatures. Lieutenant, I think the ship is carrying more of those combat units. A lot more. Mara made a split-second decision. Initiate emergency protocols. Dax, get your team armed and positioned at all potential entry points. Kira, lock down all non-essential systems and prepare the emergency data package for transmission. What about the research? Dr. Halbert asked urgently. How close are you? Mara asked. We need another 48 hours to complete the final verification tests, he replied, frustration evident in his voice. We may not have 48 minutes, Mara replied grimly. Prepare what you have for transmission and secure your most critical data. As the mysterious ship drew closer, Mara addressed the station over the internal comm system. Attention all personnel. This is not a drill. We are implementing Emergency Protocol Alpha 3. All non-security personnel are to proceed immediately to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. The response was swift and orderly, a testament to the drills Mara had been running since the first robot attack. Within minutes, research staff were secured in reinforced sections of the station while security personnel took up defensive positions. They're initiating docking procedures, Kira reported, her voice tense. They're overriding our external controls somehow. Let them think they have surprise on their side, Mara replied. Dax, Datus? Teams in position, he confirmed over the comm. All access points covered. The next 30 minutes were a blur of violence and chaos. The ship docked, and from it poured a small army of combat robots, at least 20 units, all more heavily armed and armored than the original 6. But this time, Mara's team was ready. They had studied the robots' tactics from the previous encounters and prepared accordingly. Hidden energy barriers activated at strategic points, channeling the robots into prepared kill zones. Automated defense turrets, reprogrammed by Kira to recognize the robots as hostile, provided supporting fire. Most importantly, the security team no longer held back, no longer treated this as a simulation. They fought with the desperate intensity of people defending their home and their lives. Even so, the robots' superior numbers began to tell. Gradually, they pushed deeper into the station, adapting to the defenses, finding alternate routes, working with a machine efficiency that was terrifying to behold. Mara found herself cut off from the main security team, retreating toward the central control room with Kira and 2 injured security officers. They barricaded the entrances, but it was clear the barriers wouldn't hold for long. Status report, Mara demanded, applying a pressure bandage to a wound on her arm where a robot's energy weapon had grazed her. Not good, Kira replied, her face illuminated by the glow of her console. We've neutralized 8 of their units, but the rest have spread throughout the station. They're systematically working their way through each section. Dax and his team are holding them off from the research labs, but they're running low on ammunition. And the research data? Dr. Halbert is preparing it for transmission, but our main communication array was damaged in the initial assault. We're limited to short-range emergency channels. Mara thought furiously. They needed a game changer, something the robots wouldn't expect. The original robots, she said suddenly. The ones in Cargo Bay 3, could we reprogram them to fight on our side? Kira looked skeptical. Their core programming is heavily encrypted. It would take days to completely rewrite their command protocols. We don't need to completely rewrite them, Mara insisted. Just enough to temporarily confuse their friend or foe identification. Make them see the new robots as threats. Kira's eyes widened as she grasped the plan. That might actually work. Their base code structure is likely identical. I just need to alter their target parameters. How long? 20 minutes. Maybe 15 if I take shortcuts. Do it, Mara ordered. I'll buy you time. While Kira worked feverishly on her tablet, Mara coordinated the remaining security forces via their secure communication channel. They were falling back to defensive positions around the core sections of the station, buying precious minutes with their lives. "Lieutenant," Dax's voice crackled over the comm. "We can't hold Research Lab 1 much longer. Dr. Halberd says he needs 5 more minutes to complete the data package." "Hold position," Mara instructed. "Reinforcements are coming. With all due respect, Lieutenant, unless you've got a battalion hidden somewhere, I don't see how." "Trust me, Sergeant," Mara cut him off. 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes." 14 agonizing minutes later, Kira looked up from her tablet. "It's done. The reprogramming is crude, but it should work for a short time, maybe 30 minutes before their systems detect and correct the alteration." "That's all we need," Mara said. She keyed her comm. "All security personnel, fall back to defensive positions Delta. I repeat, fall back to positions Delta immediately." As her team acknowledged and began their strategic retreat, Mara sent the command code to release and activate the 4 original combat robots from Cargo Bay 3. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kira's console lit up with new movement signatures. "They're active," she reported, "and they're engaging the other units." The 4 reprogrammed robots moved with the same lethal efficiency they had displayed during the simulations, but now their targets were their newer counterparts. The attacking force, suddenly confronted with what their systems identified as hostile units of their own type, hesitated just long enough for Mara's security team to regroup and launch a coordinated counterattack. "It's working," Kira breathed, watching the tactical display as the tide of battle slowly turned. But their advantage was short-lived. As Kira had predicted, the robots' systems began to adapt, identifying the conflicting programming and correcting it, one by one. The reprogrammed units reverted to their original protocols and turned once again on the station's personnel. "We're out of time," Mara realized. "Kira, status of Dr. Halberd's data package." "Ready for transmission, but we still don't have access to the main communication array." Mara made her decision. "Tell Dr. Halberd to bring the package to the central control room. We're going to make our stand here." As the security situation deteriorated, Dr. Halberd arrived at the control room, clutching a small data core. "Everything we've discovered is in here," he said, handing it to Mara. "The quantum transportation theories, experimental results, everything. But without the main communication array, we'll find a way," Mara assured him, though she had no idea how they would accomplish that with robots converging on their position from all directions. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the injured security officers, a quiet woman named Talia, who had previously served on a military vessel, spoke up from where she was propped against a console. "The escape pods," she said, her voice weak but determined. "They have independent communication systems, short range. But if we could get the data core to one and launch it toward the nearby shipping lane." Mara looked at her tactical display. The nearest escape pod bay was 3 sections away, through corridors now crawling with hostile robots. "It's suicide," Dax said, having finally fought his way to the control room with the remnants of his team. "Not necessarily," Mara replied, an idea forming. "The robots are programmed to eliminate all station personnel. They're focusing on life signs. What if we give them a more tempting target? A large concentration of life signs in one location. Draw them away from the escape pod route." Kira nodded, understanding. "But how?" "The environmental systems," Mara explained. "We can manipulate the life support readings to simulate a large group of personnel in the mess hall, if we make it look like most of the station's crew is gathered there. They'll concentrate their forces on that location." Dax finished. "It could work. Kira, can you set that up?" "Already on it," she replied, fingers flying over her console. "Simulating elevated oxygen consumption, increased heat signatures, the works from a sensor perspective. It'll look like 30 people are barricaded in the mess hall." "Good. Now we need a small team to get the data core to an escape pod. Volunteers? Everyone in the room raised their hand without hesitation. Mara nodded, feeling a surge of pride in her team. Dax, you're with me. The rest of you hold position here. If we don't make it, be ready with Plan B. What's Plan B? Dr. Halbert asked. Overload the station's reactor, Mara replied grimly. If we can't keep this research out of their hands, we make sure no one gets it. The diversion worked better than they could have hoped. As the robots converged on the mess hall, Mara and Dax slipped through maintenance tunnels and emergency access ways, avoiding the main corridors where possible. They encountered only 2 robot units en route to the escape pod bay, dispatching them with coordinated precision born from weeks of intense training that, ironically, had been provided by their enemies. At the escape pod bay, Mara quickly programmed the pod's small communication system to broadcast the research data on all emergency frequencies once it reached a safe distance. That should do it, she said, securing the data core in the pod's storage compartment. Once launched, it'll head straight for the shipping lane. Even if the transmission doesn't reach an academic institution directly, it'll be picked up by enough independent vessels that the research can't be suppressed. Just as they were preparing to launch the pod, the station shuddered violently. What was that? Dax asked, steadying himself against a bulkhead. Kira's voice came over their comm. Lieutenant, they're trying a new approach. They've attached some kind of device to the station's hull. It's... Her voice cut off as another, more powerful tremor shook the station. Kira? Kira, Mara called, but there was no response. A warning klaxon began to sound, and the computer's voice echoed through the corridor. Hull breach detected in sections 12 through 15. Emergency containment protocols activated. Warning, structural integrity compromised. They're trying to destroy the entire station, Dax realized. They must have figured out what we're doing. Mara made a swift decision. Launch the pod, now. Dax hesitated. But the transmission, the pod's automated systems will handle it. Mara cut him off. We need to get back to the others. As the escape pod ejected from the station, accelerating rapidly toward the distant shipping lane, Mara and Dax fought their way back through increasingly damaged sections of the station. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off the breached areas, but structural damage was spreading. When they finally reached the central control room, they found chaos. A robot assault team had breached the outer defenses, and Mara's security team was engaged in desperate close-quarters combat. Kira was wounded but still at her post, trying to maintain what remained of the station's systems. Status, Mara demanded, joining the fight. Critical, Kira replied through gritted teeth. The hull breaches are expanding. We've lost contact with 30% of the station. Life support is failing in multiple sections. The pod? Successfully away. It'll reach transmission range in approximately 20 minutes. Another violent tremor shook the station, more severe than the previous ones. Warning lights flashed across Kira's console. Reactor containment destabilizing, she reported, her voice tight with tension. Lieutenant, we're running out of options. Mara surveyed the situation grimly. Her team was fighting valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The station itself was beginning to come apart around them. And even if the escape pod successfully transmitted its precious data, there was no guarantee that anyone would come to their rescue in time, if at all. The comm system suddenly crackled to life. But instead of the expected communication from Central Command, a simple text message appeared on the main screen. No authorized training simulations active for Station Theta 9. Mara stared at the message, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. Central Command had no idea what was happening here. They hadn't sent the robots, and they weren't coming to help. She made her final decision. Kira, send a distress signal on all channels. Include everything we know about the attack. Then initiate emergency evacuation protocols. All remaining personnel to escape pods immediately. And you, Kira asked. Mara checked her weapon's charge. Someone needs to make sure that pod reaches transmission range. I'll buy you time. Lieutenant, Dax began to protest. That's an order, Sergeant. Mara cut him off. Get everyone out. That's your priority now. As her team reluctantly began the evacuation procedures, Mara took a moment to record a final message. To whoever receives this transmission, Space Research Station Theta 9 was attacked by forces we believe to be associated with the Autonomy Suppression Division. Their objective was to eliminate our research team and destroy their discoveries in quantum transportation technology. We have managed to preserve the research data and are transmitting it separately. If you are receiving this message, act on the information it contains. Don't let our sacrifice be in vain. She ended the recording and turned to Dr. Halberd, who had refused to join the evacuation. You should go with the others, she told him. The scientist shook his head. My place is with my research, Lieutenant. Besides, I may be able to help you with one last contribution. He gestured to a small device he had been working on. A quantum entanglement disruptor. Experimental, untested, but theoretically capable of interfering with the robot's coordination systems. Their processing units likely use quantum principles for their advanced decision-making capabilities. Mara took the device. Range? Limited. Perhaps 50 meters? And it will only work for a few minutes before burning out. That might be just enough, Mara said, a plan forming in her mind. Thank you, Doctor. The evacuation proceeded rapidly as the station continued to deteriorate around them. Mara positioned herself at a crucial junction that the robots would have to pass to reach the escape pod bays. Dr. Halberd remained in the control room, monitoring the station's failing systems and the progress of the escaping pods. First wave of pods away, he reported over the comm. Robots are converging on your position, Lieutenant. Understood, Mara replied. She could hear them now, the rhythmic metallic footsteps growing louder as they approached from multiple directions. She activated Dr. Halberd's device just as the first robots appeared. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The units staggered, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. Several collided with each other or the walls, unable to maintain their precise targeting. Mara didn't waste the opportunity. With methodical precision, she eliminated the confused robots one by one, using the tactics and techniques she had learned during those simulations that now seemed a lifetime ago. Second wave of pods away, Dr. Halberd reported. Kira and the last group are preparing to launch now. The escape pod with the research data has almost reached transmission range. Mara allowed herself a small smile. They might actually pull this off. But her triumph was short-lived. The quantum disruptor sputtered and died, just as Dr. Halberd had predicted. And immediately, the remaining robots regained their coordination, adapting their approach to counter her position. Final pod, ready for launch, came Dr. Halberd's voice. Lieutenant, you need to get to the escape bay now. There's still one pod remaining. Negative, Mara replied, firing steadily as she began a fighting retreat. I'll draw them away from your launch vector. Just make sure that research data gets transmitted. Lieutenant Vell, Dr. Halberd said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. It has been an honor serving with you. Likewise, Doctor, Mara replied. Now go. As the final escape pod launched from the dying station, Mara found herself cornered in a small maintenance bay. The robots had pursued her relentlessly, exactly as she had intended, drawing them away from the escaping pods. Her weapon's charge was nearly depleted, and the station around her groaned and shuddered as structural failures cascaded through its frame. But Mara felt a strange sense of peace. She had done her duty. Her team was safe, and the research that could transform humanity's future, would survive. The lead robot approached, its featureless face somehow conveying menace despite its lack of expression. You lose, Mara told it, even knowing the machine couldn't understand the concept. The data is already being transmitted. You can kill me, but you can't stop what's coming." The robot raised its weapon. Then the maintenance bay was filled with blinding light as a massive structural beam gave way, crashing down between Mara and the robots. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut automatically, separating her from her pursuers. Warning klaxons blared as the computer announced, "Critical system failure, station breakup imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately." Mara laughed bitterly. Evacuate to where? All the escape pods were gone. But as she looked around the maintenance bay, her trained eye spotted something the station's designers had included but probably never expected to be used. An ancient emergency survival pod, little more than a reinforced coffin with minimal life support and a rudimentary distress beacon. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. 6 months later, a small, unmarked shuttle docked at a remote training facility on the outer rim. From it emerged Lieutenant Mara Vell, now sporting a prominent scar across her left cheek and eyes that had seen too much. She was greeted by Sergeant Dax, Kira Ilan, and the surviving members of her security team from Theta 9. They had found each other gradually in the months following the station's destruction, drawn together by a shared understanding that the official explanation, a catastrophic reactor failure, was a convenient lie. "Welcome to Outpost Phoenix," Dax said, gesturing to the modest facility behind him. "It's not much, but it's ours." "Phoenix?" Mara asked, raising an eyebrow. "Seemed appropriate," Kira replied with a small smile. "Rising from the ashes and all that." As they walked through the facility, Dax explained how they had pooled their resources, called in favors, and established this independent training center, officially registered as a private security consulting operation. "Most of our clients are remote outposts and research stations," he said. "Places that don't fully trust Central Command's protection anymore." "And Dr. Halberd's research?" Mara asked. "Successfully transmitted," Kira confirmed. "It's being developed by 3 independent academic institutions now. Central Command tried to suppress it initially, but it spread too quickly. The ASD apparently overplayed their hand. The attack on a civilian research station was too extreme even for their political allies to defend. They arrived at a large training hall where a group of recruits was engaged in combat drills. Mara noticed immediately that they were practicing against robot opponents, but these were clearly marked as training units, with none of the sleek menace of the assassin robots from Theta 9. "Our first class of trainees," Dax explained proudly. "We've been using the tactics we learned from our experience." Mara watched as the recruits moved with impressive coordination, employing the very strategies her team had developed against their would-be killers. "What do you tell them?" she asked. "About where these tactics came from?" Kira smiled. "We show them the recordings we managed to salvage from Theta 9, the simulations that weren't simulations. We tell them the truth, that when no one was coming to save us, we saved ourselves." Mara nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had carried the responsibility of her team's survival for so long, wondering if she had made the right decisions, if there had been another way. "And we give them a warning," Dax added, his expression serious. "When they ask why we train so hard, why we push them beyond conventional security protocols, we tell them what we learned at Theta 9. "Which is?" Mara asked. "When you're out on the edge of space, no one is coming to rescue you," Dax replied. "Your team, your skills, and your courage are the only weapons that truly matter." Mara watched the trainees for a moment longer, then turned to her former team, her friends, with a smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. "Then let's make sure they're the best weapons in the galaxy," she said. "Class is in session."